everyone being here. Really excited about this event today. Just going to give you a quick rundown of some different services that are available through the DI team. First of all, we're a collection of professionals that are in either people roles within organizations, so HR managers or even leaders, executive team members, and also just individuals and team members of those companies that appreciate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and want to implement them into their organizations. We are not simply just made up for advertising and marketing and creative agencies. We're also open to corporate entities. So that includes even people such as AdventHealth, OUC, that are involved with us even here today. So that's a little bit about the team. We've been around, actually just kind of kicked back up within the last year or so. So we're excited about getting things up and running. Some of the resources that are available through the team, first and foremost, it is a free team to be a part of. So that's something I'll talk to you about in a moment. It's really just about if you're interested in these services and want to support, it's something that you can get involved with within AF Orlando. Some things we like to do are host events. So this is actually the second event that we've put on for our role within DEI within AF Orlando. The first one was back in July. We do have some helpful content, such as blog articles and different resources that we're looking to develop. One of those resources is a list of DEI support organizations that are available both in a local aspect, a regional aspect, and a national aspect. We've had quite a few different of our members of AAF wanting to identify how they can reach out to some different organizations for support. So we have that resource available so you can get that, that kind of support and development that you need. And lastly, we have a DEI Slack team. And this is a place for team members to share out helpful content, blog articles, videos, different resources, events that are coming up, and making sure that the entire team is aware of different events that are going on, resources that could be helpful to their teams as they look to further these initiatives within their organizations. If you're interested in joining that team, please send over an email to diversity@aaf-orlando.org with your first name and last name, your preferred email address to join that team, and lastly, your reason for joining that team, whether you're in a people role or you're just interested in learning more about these initiatives. I would love to be able to just kind of get an understanding of what it is you're looking to implement into the organization. And with that, we're going to get started with this event. But before we get going, I definitely want to check in with Ralphie, see if there's any information that we have available that we need to share out to all the attendees.
Hey everyone, just a few housekeeping items. We are going to be doing polls throughout the presentation. This poll is anonymous, so please be transparent and honest. No one's going to judge you. This is a safe space. Also, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, we will be doing a Q&A at the end. Go ahead and put that in the Q&A box. You do have the ability to make that anonymous as well. We want you to be part of the dialogue and enjoy the conversation, so feel free to utilize that anonymous feature if needed. But other than that, Arthur, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. And actually, I've meant one slide early. I want to just briefly introduce our panel before we get going. We have Alicia Williams with us here today. She was actually a part of our event back in July, so thank you so much for rejoining this event, Alicia. We have Amber, the Vice President from Spectrum Reach, joining us today as well. Chris Leblanc, VP Creative Director at Evok Advertising, and Dave Diaz, Founder and Marketing Director at RedFork Marketing. Thank you all so much for being here. Are you guys excited to get going for the day?
Yeah. Let's do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Wait, let's go.
All right, very cool. Well, before we get started, we want to definitely make sure that this event is going to be around critiquing 4 different pieces that we found today. They're going to be video pieces, and we want to make sure that we have an open conversation around that. So we're looking forward to your insight and availability from there. So let's get going. Oh, we also want to make sure that we're not necessarily critiquing the production quality of these ads. We are looking at it from a diversity and representation aspect. So that's what the focus of this conversation will be about today. All right. And to get us going with that, I have a quote here that I think is really important. Diversity is more innovative than expertise. I definitely believe in that. I think that's something that I've been having conversations with different agencies and organizations that are doing really great work and are looking to improve and maybe don't have as diverse of a team as they want to have. And what are some of the benefits around bringing in different types of people from different spaces and different life experiences to be able to kind of shape the work that they have. So hopefully that gives us some insight and perspective as we get into this first piece for today. This first one's going to be from INTUIT. It's actually about QUICKBOOks. And this is a promo that they have called The Accountable. This piece came out very recently. So in September of 2020, there are no awards for this piece whatsoever, but I think it's a really good one to kind of check out and get started with. All right, so here we go. Let's take a look at it.
This is the audio, Arthur.
Yes.
Yeah. Is the audio not coming through?
Not coming through, no.
Let me take out my headphones. I'm sorry, one moment.
So actually, Arthur, if you select the drop down from the share thing, there's an option in that menu that says share this computer audio or share computer audio, something like that.
Well, let's do that then. Thank you, Dave Diaz.
No problem.
We believe in collaboration here at AF. So thank you, Dave.
No problem. Happy to lend IT services.
Bringing in lots of information. Let's try that again. You hear now?
There we go.
No one holds themselves accountable like accountants.
Welcome to the pants optional work life.
You're overcranked, you're underthanked, take it to the bank, personal hero.
How do you keep up with this stuff?
The work-life balancers who manage to make the clients, the kids, and their four-legged friends all their #1 priority.
I've got to get going. My family's going to leave without me.
They're the accounting professionals on the front lines of economic recovery. The ones who aren't just hoping for a better tomorrow, but who are actively making a plan for it.
You're getting an over $7,000 refund this year.
You were joking.
More than just number crunchers. There are advisors, our brain trusts, our partners. Why?
Because I am an accounting professional.
That's right. Because while they hold themselves accountable to the rest of the world, we at QUICKBOOks hold ourselves accountable to them.
No problem. I'm your accountant.
All right. So that is the first piece, and again, that came out in September of 2020. And before we get started, Ralph, if you want to activate that first poll that we have for our viewers, I want to get some insight and feedback around what you thought about this first piece. And so please take a moment to answer that. And while you're answering that poll, let's get started first and foremost with the question about what do we like about this piece? And I'll let Amber kick us off with that.
Oh, I get to go first?
You do.
All right. I think it was a great piece, and I will say I really like that we're just, as the panelists, seeing the pieces now, because at first I was like, oh, I would love to review them ahead of time, but I think, you know, you guys are right. It definitely makes for a more engaging and sort of off-the-cuff conversation. What I will say is I think they did it right. I think they captured a lot of different elements. I think when I look at a piece like this, I focus on copy and I focus on imagery, right? So the words that the voiceover is saying, as well as the images that are portrayed on the screen. And I think they did it right. I think the copy was good, it resonated, and I think the imagery was right on point from a diverse perspective.
That's great. Yeah. Also, I did try to send out these pieces a little bit ahead of time, so I don't know, maybe once you're
you know what?
I'm glad you're having that experience.
It's fine.
Very off the cuff. That's great. Chris, what do you think about it?
Well, I really like the fact that it was diverse in what it was trying to get across, and the double play on holding yourself accountable. I thought it was great that they showed different lifestyles and different people kind of going about their day. It didn't seem staged, which I really hate. There's a lot of unconscious bias when they try to do diversity spots, and the way they kind of spread it out, it seemed like just a natural slice of life. So I always like advertising that gets its point across, but does it in a way that's, you know, a little bit under the radar. So it was good.
Yeah, great. Dave, Alicia, do you have any thoughts about what do we like about this piece?
Yeah, for me, like a lot of the stuff that we create nowadays is all about relevancy, right? So I love the fact that we are looking at a world in which we're actively living in. Like that was so cool to me, right? Because when we think about diversity, right, and we talk about inclusion, I think the first and easiest thing to nail is skin color, right? Like that's the topic of conversation today. But are we talking about the fact that like there is some dude sitting at home that is not wearing shorts, like living that type of lifestyle, also being an accountant with the type of person who is very professionally dressed and, you know, lives a totally different lifestyle, right? And so I love the fact that it's highly relevant, but it's also incredibly relevant to like the lifestyle that we're currently living in, which really allows for a lot of different types of people. So I absolutely love that about this piece.
Yeah.
And I would say the same, echoing what everyone else is saying. Of course, from my diversity lens, I think they covered the gamut. So I think that's a great piece. And then especially working from home, how your kids have a different agenda. Definitely that spoke to me personally because they don't care what you're working on. And so I think that's, it was just great. It showed different types of couples and different ages as well. Generational diversity was very present there. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was really, it was on brand for them. It wasn't a reach. That's another thing.
Yeah.
So it also showed diversity in the accounting industry. And so that was another thing that stood out.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the questions that we have from there. I think it's going to be, I think what they did really well with this is that it wasn't forced. They demonstrated a lot of different types of people that are working within the space right now, as Dave was alluding to. And it doesn't seem forced or mandated to kind of just check off the boxes. It does feel very natural about what's happening. So yeah, I think that's been really great. Before we get into the next question, let's take a look at these poll results that we have here. So the question was, how well does this piece provide representation? And a majority of people says that it provided great representation. A few people said it was a decent job, and some people said they were neutral about it. So I think that's really great for us to kind of understand as well, because the next question that I wanted to address is, what do we think could be improved about this? And clearly there's some thoughts around that it's kind of just neutral or in the middle of that. So even though we overall are saying that it's a really good piece and it's not forced at all, there's obviously room for improvement with that. So Chris, what do you think about that first?
You know, you take 10 pounds and put in a 5-pound bag. The only thing I would say is it was so chopped up and it didn't really get to unpack much. You saw snippets. And I think if we're going to focus on, I think Dave touched on it earlier, it's easy to show skin color, but there's so many sub-levels of diversity. Interracial couples, I think they had an LGBT reference in there. And I think there's different ways, mixed families. I think there's a bigger opportunity to kind of break that up over multiple commercials. So it'd be great to see it slow down a little bit and you get the pacing. But as a tongue-in-cheek spot, and I think Terry said is kind of poking at certain areas, it does a good job in that way, but I would love for it to slow down the pacing so we could really see that diversity in the spot, I think would unfold a little easier.
Yeah, Amber, it looks like you're getting ready to say something else as well. Yeah,
I think I agree with what Chris said, but I also think in addition to that, you know, he mentioned maybe doing more spots like that, right? So if I were part of the team that created that campaign, I would probably take a good hard look at the research about the campaign and then say, now how much further can I go? What else can I do? How can I make, you know, how can I make this brand and what we're trying to do extend beyond just one 30-second spot?
Yeah, and it is really tough to kind of cram it all into a 60-second. That's a 60-second spot right there. And then it begs the question of, do we want to try to have as much representation as possible? This is going to be a one video campaign and we want to try to get a message out there, or do we think it's better to slow it down and pace it out? And then I think that runs the risk of, are we only representing a certain lifestyle or a few lifestyles? We're not representing all different people. And what is the reaction that we would have to that from there? Alicia, what do you think about that process of it?
Well, honestly, for me, like, to that point, to Dave's point about it being relevant, I feel like that's how my life is. It's very fast paced. It's not slowing down right now. I feel like I have a ton of meetings on there. So I think I kind of related from that perspective as well. You're just flashing and getting snippets. Totally. I think from a perspective of making it a campaign, you do run the risk of, so do you have like 3 aspects of diversity in a commercial and then 4 in this one? So I think it was true to maybe how people's lives are feeling right now, a little all over the place. And I really liked it. I don't really have any critiques for that. I think it could be a campaign, but I liked it as is.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, then the last question. Oh, sorry, Dave, you have something on that?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Chris, you know, you talked about slowing it down. I also too liked the pace because I don't think the purpose of the commercial was to like dive into each of the individual people's lives. I think it was to like you know, show, I think it was to show two things. One, to show the incredible differences of what an accountant actually is. And then two, I think the other purpose was to show like these accountants are like, they're going nuts, right? Like their lives are heavy, right? And it's crazy and it's hectic and it's chaotic. And I think that the pace of the commercial lines up with that personally. But as far as like improvements, I really don't see a lot of room for improvement. I think the one area for improvement to me was when I got to the end of that commercial, I went, oh, this is an advertisement for accountants. Got it. And that's the one thing that I wish I kind of knew from the beginning. I wish I kind of knew from the beginning that like speaking about relevancy, that this advertisement was specifically for the sake of accountants, that it was targeted to accountants, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, this was an internal promotion from there. And but yeah, I definitely see both sides of the argument. I do like the pacing of this first 60-second spot, but on the other hand, I would be interested to see if this was turned into a campaign, and maybe there are follow-up videos that really expand upon that. Maybe we explore the like 1 or 2 or 3 of the characters a bit more, or maybe there's additional 60-second spots, 30-second spots that just focus on one of the target families from there. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting from that. Last, really quick, we kind of touched on this already, is how do we feel of this being on brand? Do we think that this matches the Intuit QuickBooks brand overall?
Totally.
Pretty good.
So.
Yeah, I think so as well. So really great to see. Let's move on to the next one. All right, here we go. So this next piece is going to be from Microsoft. This is actually from Xbox. This video, or this spot came out in holiday of 2018. This is from McCann up in New York, which is a large agency that's known for doing a lot of great work, and actually won a 2019 AAF Mosaic Media Image Award for advocacy. And so just so everyone's aware, the Mosaic Council is the diversity arm of AAF Orlando National. So they actually won an award for that. And let's take a look at this piece really quick.
He's gonna do it! You gotta see this! Oh, he's gonna do it! Come on, come on! He's gonna do it! Alright, I'm running. I got him. That's nice. Come on. Yeah, let's go. So how about another game?
All right. So that's a piece from Xbox a couple years ago, did win an award, maybe a few others. We'll start this off, first of all, with Ralphie, if you want to activate that next poll. This ad specifically focuses on people with disabilities, of course. And so I think this is a really good, interesting fact of what is the ratio of Americans that actually live with a disability. So we'll get to those poll results in just a moment. And while we wait for that, what do we like about this piece? Chris, you want to kick us off?
What do I like about it?
Yeah.
It was a nice story. I really didn't like the spot at all. So yeah, probably the wrong person to ask.
Okay.
I thought it was really pandering.
All right, well,
you're going to start maybe not running.
Yeah, we'll get to the critiques for sure on what we think can be improved. But does anybody have anything they'd like to say? What do they like about the piece in general?
I liked, well, one, it's Christmas, it's, appealing to kids and parents. It gives you all the feels. I think it does a great job of showing a group, people with disabilities who are not often included. I do know the answer to the ratio. I was going to say it, but I won't, and I'll wait till the poll comes. But because of that ratio, I think these are things that need to be displayed. And I also like gender diversity because girls play video games too. Maybe it's just Pac-Man or Tetris, but we play them, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say I really like the fact that it is well split between boys and girls. That was very, because there is the stereotype that like oh, it's Call of Duty and that's a bunch of boys, and then that's it, right? Fortnite, bunch of boys. And so I think it was cool to be able to see that. And then in addition to that, I think what was really interesting about this one was when we talk about disabilities, I don't think this is one that kids think about very often. And I think that it was really interesting to show this specifically. And more so, not only that, like, that Microsoft wants to include them, but they've actually gone through the process of developing an entire module specifically developed for kids with disabilities. And it's interesting. I don't know if you guys dove deep into this, but even the packaging for that item is totally different, is designed specifically for them to be able to unbox it on their own. Like, everything has loops that they can grab onto so they can pull it out of the package. And so I think that that's really cool. We'll obviously get to the critiques in a second, but I think from that perspective, I really liked those components.
Great. Well, Amber, do you have anything you want to share about liking it before we move on to Chris's critiques?
I really liked this one. Sorry, Chris. I really liked this one too. It definitely gave me the chills. I agree with what the other panelists said. And, this kind of advertising is purpose-driven advertising. It's a little bit different. It's trying to drive home a message, with a very specific message about accessibility. And I liked that there was different layers of diversity represented in the ad. You had, different ages of kids. You had, kids running in the middle of the street. You had kids sitting with their parents. So
I didn't even
really
think about the ages. That's so cool. Yes, I love that.
Yeah, well, age is, diversity of ages, right? We have to really. It's not just always about what race or ethnicity. Diversity could mean anything, right? So I really appreciated that, and I like this one as well.
Good. Yeah, and a lot of people are lining that in the chat as well. That is, definitely pulling at the heartstrings. It's a lot of different focus on accessibility and age diversity. I actually felt like this ad was a bit more staged in comparison to the accountable ad. It does feel the timeline, the storyline, and the resolve of the ad definitely feels a bit more structured and hitting the checkpoints. So it doesn't feel as natural as the first ad that we watched. I remember the first time I watched it, I really, really enjoyed it. This is now like my 10th time watching it. So of course that magic's gonna rub off a little bit, but that is something I noticed from the very first time that I watched it, is a bit more structured. So before we get to Chris's critiques, which should be its own podcast, I think that'd be great. Let's take a look at these poll results. What is the ratio of Americans who live with a disability? So 52% of people said 1 out of every 7. 39% of people said 1 out of every 10, and 9 people said 1 out of every 4. Alicia, do you want to reveal the answer to the results to this question here?
1 in 4.
It is 1 in 4. Yeah. So actually, 1 out of every 4 Americans lives with a form of disability. So I think that's great insight. I know I attended a webinar from AAF recently as well, and that's pretty shocking for me to find out. But there's a lot of different types of disabilities that are available, whether they're vision, hearing, physical. So there's 1 out of every 4 people. That's a very large population. And so I think that's, as we were alluding to before, that's a demographic, that's a group of people that don't often get brought into the conversation or represented. And so I think it's really important to do that. And so Microsoft actually did a follow-up campaign to this in 2019 that also focused on Owen, who is the star kid of this video. So I think it's really great that they're incorporating that into their marketing. But Chris, let's go. Hit us with it. With the critique.
All right, now I'm going to be the jerk, right? So you just led up to it. No, one, I really have a thing about spots that I feel are pandering, and the surprise hero at the end is very formulaic, right? I don't like if the hero is the person who's playing the game, why is he inside while all his friends are outside not playing with him? So I kind of look at it with a different, perspective. I've worked with UCP for years, United Cerebral Palsy. And so I see the superheroes, these people are constantly. So some of it, like you said, felt very formulaic. And I think we need to sprinkle in a couple people of different ages, of different ethnicities. I think there's a better opportunity where maybe it was the girl that's getting the high score and the kid in the wheelchair, he's going with them. Or, I think there's a different opportunity to display that in a way that's much more consumable. And to Dave's point, yeah, there's a lot of work that Microsoft puts into accessibility into their programs and the way that the products are built. But for this, it just seems like a hyped up story to have the surprise ending. I really felt like it was a total disconnect for me.
Yeah,
sorry, I can be the person everybody boos and does whatever, but I really don't like pandering spots.
You actually got a lot of alignment here in the comments as well, and saying that's a great perspective. And I think that's an important aspect of this event, is that we want to look at it and tear things apart and not just align with every single piece that comes in there. There's always room for improvement. So any other thoughts from the other panelists around?
I think Chris actually makes a great point, and I didn't think about it that way. And it makes me think about big brands like Microsoft having to be very careful in this space, right? Because they have whole teams devoted to D&I, internal teams working on messaging, teams working on employee relations. You know, they have teams devoted to this, and if they're not careful, they could fall into that trap where things do look staged, and they are following a formula, and consumers can see that and feel that. So I think it's a great point.
Yeah, definitely.
If I can add to this quickly, there's one thing that stuck out to me the first time I watched this video, and it drove me nuts. I think it's so easy to overlook stereotypes, and if anything, to like confirm them through an advertisement like this. Why was the person who was being so strict about the piano lesson Asian, right? Like, I know that sounds crazy, and maybe that's not a popular opinion to have here, but like, that is a stereotype that I think is joked about in comedy, that's talked about negatively even. Like, why was that decision, that cast chosen for that specific part of that script? I don't think that's the first thing that stuck out to me, where I was like, whoa. So that's really the one part where I would say, like, if anything could be improved without doing a massive overhaul, like, let's recast that individual at least.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important aspect of it, is the only way that you can really identify that is to have someone in the room that's creating this advertisement from storyboarding to be able to say that this is something that we should be aware of and we should change this. So yeah, I think that's a great point, and we need to make sure that we have representation in the creative process as well as just on the other side. Chris, you just reacted to something really quick.
No, I was reading the comments. I'm like, yay, I'm not hated. So
oh yeah.
I'm usually that guy that overthinks something. So I usually see from the perspective. So I'm glad. Safe place.
Yeah, definitely a safe place for sure. So last question is, do we think this is on brand for the company that produced this? This is from Microsoft. Do we think this is a good on brand advertisement? Chris says no.
Nope.
Well, if they do have, accessible packaging, I think it's on brand, and to support that. And, it's Christmas, kids are asking for video game systems. So I can see either way on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's improvements to be made, but ultimately on brand for Microsoft.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really tough from a large corporate entity, as you were talking about before. Like, how do you make sure that you have a very, very large audience? How do you make sure you're connecting with your audience, but also getting out a message about inclusivity and really focusing on involving everyone into that? It's a tricky situation for large brands to figure out. It's also tricky and difficult for small brands to figure out and really connect with their smaller audience from there as well. So great discussion. Let's move on to the third piece of the day. So this one's actually going to come from Procter & Gamble. This piece came out in June of 2020. This is actually a piece that was released by Gray, New York, so another large ad agency. Since it came out so recently, there are no accolades associated with this piece. So let's take a look and see what we think.
I feel guarded.
Judgment.
It's fear of rejection.
I pause when I'm about to encounter someone new. Hello, this is Joe, my roommate.
Airport security, going through customs.
With my coworkers, clients.
I feel like I have to not touch her, like in the grocery store.
It's nonstop.
It changes how I navigate the world sometimes, but I can't change who I am.
It makes me feel resentful. They miss out on me at the end of the day.
That's the worst part.
I would love to have that moment where I don't have to pause.
This is Joe. This is my partner of 37 years. Flight. Openness.
Maybe we could just be ourselves.
I could just show up as my true self without having to explain who I am.
So that piece was called The Pause. And Ralph, if you want to activate our next poll before we get started with the discussion here. So this poll is about same-sex marriage. Obviously, this is focusing on this advertising, focusing on the LGBTQ plus community. So this is about when did the first legal same-sex marriage take place in the United States? And to kick us off with the discussion, I'm going to ask Dave, what do you like about this piece?
I like that we're removing it from the typical storyline structure and it's that interview like scene. I like that because it feels a lot more real. You know, we talked about how something can feel staged when you build that story structure. What's cool about this and what I really, really like about this is that we're not immediately blasted with what it is that we're talking about. It kind of takes the audience on a journey and gets them to figure it out together, right? There's a format of training that we love to use here at RedFork, which is facilitation. And facilitation is significantly better than lecture because when somebody comes on a journey with you and they figure something out together with you, it means more, it's more meaningful, it sticks more. And so it's not just the visuals to me, it's the way they actually put everything together that's really meaningful, I think.
Anyone else, any other comments around what do we like about this piece?
I mean, I really liked it. I think it speaks to the things that you're thinking about when you're a part of a marginalized group, things that we take for granted. You know, I know that's one of the questions that are asked on like surveys about, you know, do you think about holding your partner's hand, those types of things, right? So it's a privilege when you don't, it's not something you have to think about on a regular basis. I don't think that it's on brand. So I don't know about that. Like, I don't know what is it like another, I saw the campaign, but I don't know what that entailed aside from maybe like donating money or creating awareness. But yeah, I think I don't know how they would have tied it back to the products that they sell, but overall, I think it creates great awareness and allyship, hopefully, for the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm 50 years old. I came out at 19 in this industry where it's at now to where it is today. If you know, you know, I still live with the pause. And if, you know, people outside of the LGBTQ plus community, they can relate, but maybe, you know, a straight person or somebody who's not exposed to that community understand that that's a real thing. And we're talking diversity is great, right? Inclusion, that's a whole nother thing. And there's a lot of equity being put into this by Procter & Gamble. So it is non-brand. I don't think it is, but if your message is to understand, we understand the people who work for us and our audience, I mean, it's a huge win, I think, for a conversation that needs to happen. And it's a very difficult one. So I think to Dave's point, taking the set breakdown and having it a candid moment, it's a risk, but I think with a big reward, because if it starts conversations, and I always think, you know, great opportunities in DEI come from courageous conversations, and that's stepping out of your comfort zone and addressing something with somebody. I don't know who else on the panel is LGBTQ plus, but like is this the right person or time to introduce to my partner how that conversation happens? It's still to this day, I mean, even though things have changed, it's still pretty scary.
Yeah. Amber, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I have a couple of feelings about this one. You know, like Dave mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I definitely didn't understand at the beginning of the spot where we were going. Of course, I support it, you know, being an LGBTQ plus member myself of the community. Obviously, I support it, married to a woman, very much in love. But I didn't get it at the beginning, right? So I was a little bit confused. So it took me a little while to to really understand where they were going with the spot. What I will say that I really liked was that they shot it in such an intimate way for something that is so intimate, right? So we're talking about same-sex marriage here, and the way that they shot it was very, very intimate, having the people just sort of sitting there talking about their experiences and their lives. What I do think really matters about this spot is when I think about education, and I think about, you know, we're an incredibly diverse nation, right? And I'm born and raised New Yorker, and I don't have the pause. I just go about my day to day. You know, out and proud and I am who I am. But when you think about the rest of this country, there are areas where it's not like that for many people and many people in our community. And I think this spot could go a long way towards educating people in those pockets of the country that may not understand the pause, may not know anything about it, and may also be trying to figure out, you know, who they are. So I think that's something that it really does capture.
Yeah, and I think that word that you use, intimate, is the first word that came to mind for me. I think that this piece does a great job at kind of revealing this really intimate, very personal, very difficult moment that people go through. And I think that's a great gateway into finding understanding and empathy, which is super important when you're trying to connect with people. So I thought this piece did a great job. I love when I think this piece did a great job at capturing my attention and making me say, like, what am I really watching? Actually, when I found this piece for this event, I was like, what is this? What direction is this? And so I like when there's some mystery at the beginning and I have to kind of figure it out at the end and I can go back. But yeah, that does not do a great job at capturing you like right away for you to understand what this message is about. So there's a give and take there. But I think, yeah, very intimate and overall great message. I think one of the questions that we had later is about this being on brand. And I think that's going to be an interesting conversation because I think brands are slowly shifting towards having a responsibility of getting these messages out there, especially when you're in a large corporation. And I think that's now shifting down into small business. And we really saw that with the civil unrest for the past few months as well. Like small businesses were even being called up to action around how are they supporting what's going on in the country. So I think it's going to be changing where it doesn't necessarily have to relate to your products and services that you offer, but where do you stand and how are you supporting all people within your market. Before we get into the last couple of questions here, so the question was, in what year did the first legal same-sex marriage take place in the US? Chris, Amber, do you know, as members of the community? Okay, Amber, yes?
I should know this. I'm gonna get in a lot of trouble for this.
I mean, there's so much history that people don't know from everything, but I'll take you off the hook there. It is 2004. So 38% of you said it was from 2004. That is correct. A lot of people said 2009. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think that's really great to just get awareness of. That's still incredibly recent for groups of people that have been around since the very beginning of time that are now just legally being represented. So it's unfortunate, but we got a long way to go within that. What do we think can be improved about this brand or this spot? Alicia, I'll start with you.
I don't know. I think if the point is awareness, I think it's spot on. I think like everyone said, it touches the emotional piece. I know for me, the guy in particular who says, when he like corrects himself, like this is my, you know, my husband or my partner for 30 plus years, it kind of puts into perspective. And especially when you think about the effort it takes to be married to anyone, right? For years and decades, like who cares what your partner is, because geez, that's a lot of effort, right? You all are dedicated to this cause. So I think that that part really was called out to me, because I think that's sad. You have a pause, but you're so dedicated to this person that you love. So I thought it was great. Maybe I'm just too easygoing. As long as, you know, as long as they speak to diversity, I'm like, I like it. So
yeah. Any other thoughts about what can be improved?
I personally wouldn't change anything about this ad. I really liked it through and through.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, great.
It may be a strong, it may be a different call to action at the end or something, maybe to engage in a conversation or to do whatever. But I do love that it was a statement piece. It seemed like it was like, what did it say, on period? Like that was it when it's done.
Yeah,
that was it.
And I think at the end they did share, if I remember correctly, like they did share a hashtag. They did ask you to like join P&G or whatever. And I actually I can't wait to get to the brand question, but I like that it didn't necessarily promote or connect it with an actual product or one of the brands of P&G. I really liked that, you know?
Good. Yeah. And Mitch in the comments says, like, what is the brand doing to support other than simply make the ad? And I think that's a great question. It's like, how do you follow suit with that? Similar to Nike and Colin Kaepernick and different initiatives, like how are you following suit? It's not just about getting that attention just for the moment or just for the advertisement, but what are you doing after the fact? So yeah, Dave, since you're so excited about the on-brand question, let's have you touch base on this?
I am, because today in this day and age, you know, being on brand before was about making sure that, you know, your product stood out from a beneficial standpoint, that you were communicating value, that you ultimately were showing that this product like enhanced people's lives. And that was really a big component of what being on brand was. I think today that's totally different. I think today we're seeing brands stand up for, you know, the environment, stand up for inclusion and diversity. We're seeing brands represent things and ultimately say like, hey, we do make these incredible products. We do have these incredible brands, but this is what we believe. And we're opening up our doors that would typically be closed because we just want you to buy the products. We're opening this up to show you what we believe, and we're marching in this direction together, you know? Yeah. And for a company like Procter & Gamble, who owns Old Spice, Olay Cosmetics to Tide and Gain, right? Like these products, I think, are designed for and made for different types of people. And I think that that's incredibly important. I think there's a cynical side to that where you go, okay, this is just somebody trying to gain market share. But the other side of it is that they're really focusing on relevancy and trying to create products that are highly relevant to specific groups of people so that they feel really comfortable with that product. So as P&G continues to do that, I think this ad is super on brand and very relevant.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, you know, you Procter & Gamble, those are lifestyle brands, right? Those are things that enhance or better your lifestyle. So why not all lifestyles? And I think that's, you know, the first step into truly inclusion is getting those conversations started. And I do think it's directly on brand. If you're going to promote lifestyle brands, you need to make sure that you're open to all lifestyles. And I think that's when things start to get, you know, a little bit dicey if you don't walk the walk. Everybody holds each other accountable now. So I was interested to see what they're doing to follow up to that, or what, you know, how this aligns with their initiatives.
Well, for the sake of time, we're going to move on to the last piece here because we're down to less than 10 minutes. So this is actually from TINDER. So we're going to end with a little bit of love here from this company. So this is actually from 2018. This was produced by a company called Buck in Los Angeles, and that's a production company. There were no awards given to this from a diversity perspective or an advertising perspective per se. They were mainly around production awards, but there's quite a few different awards that were given out. So let's take a look at this last piece here.
A long time ago, there was someone, and they were alone. But don't be sad, it was fine. But then, one day, they met another someone, which was scary at first. But then they realized, we should hang out. So they did. They shared things and learned things. And it was fun. But then they made it complicated. They made up all these dumb rules about who could be together and forced others together for weird reasons. And it wasn't cool for a lot of people for a long time. But then something happened. Everyone started to make their own decisions again. They got together with who they wanted, when they wanted. And getting together was fun again, like it was in the beginning. And we don't know what happened next, but we're pretty sure it kept getting better.
All right, so that was in a spot called Invention of Togetherness, again from TINDER in 2018. And Ralph, if you want to announce that last poll. And to get started, I'll start with Alicia. And we're talking about what we like about this piece. this easygoing.
Oh gosh, of course this is, I spoke too soon. I think what I like about this one, I guess maybe like the journey of relationships, maybe the access of like, I guess that TINDER provides. They have a little bit of diversity there, and there's a same-sex couple in the bar. There's a racially diverse couple. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's all I have for this one. Yeah.
Good for you, Alicia. You did it.
Yes.
The animation was cool. Yeah. No, the animation was cool.
Yeah.
Well,
kind of.
Was it? Yeah, I thought it was interesting, the animation style.
Well, then let's open it up and let's get to the other side of things.
What's the obsession with claymation glutes? I didn't understand why. I've never seen that much ass on a claymation spot.
I'm still trying to figure this one out. I mean, I'm struggling a little bit with this one. I feel like
we had to have a lot of diversity of different types of ads we looked at today as well. So wanted to really kind of mix it up. So yeah.
Great animation though. I mean, it was really. I like that style.
I think the style was incredible. Yeah, and there's definitely a good reason why they won a ton of awards for that. But then from a diversity perspective, what do we think was missing the mark then? What do we think was off?
Check the boxes.
Yeah, they did that. I think from a perspective, like I know a few people that were in an arranged marriage, and I think that kind of gives a negative connotation in that space. So, and then like the queen and the hierarchy, people are really into that. So it's just, I don't know if I would have gone that route. I get what they were trying to convey is that over time we're able to choose who we love and, there's less outside voice on it, but I don't know if I would have gone that route with it. I think it might be offensive to some people.
When I first watched this, I thought there was a very specific type of people that were represented for 45 seconds, 50 seconds of the spot,
Agreed.
And it was like, we went through this like kind of white European route until the very end. And then there's a snapshot in the bar of lots of different types of people.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's great, there's plenty of opportunity earlier within that spot to introduce different cultures, different people. Like it doesn't have to be a king and queen that's based in Europe or medieval times in Europe, right? It could have been in Africa, it could have been South America, and we could have introduced some diversity from there. On the other hand, they may come into the portion that we always talk about where it feels forced or if it feels formulaic and if we're just introducing different subgroups. So, but yeah, that was one of the first things I noticed where I was just like, it seemed like it was too forced, too late, too quick at the end. So
I think you bring a good point. What happened is they sent it to the client and they said, this is not diverse enough. Can you please do that? So they recut the smallest amount that they could reanimate.
And
let's go to the bar.
And what they did not do was they did not tweak any of the copy. So I feel like the copy was very sort of plain, and that the words and the phrases and even the actual voice of the person doing the voiceover, there was definitely an opportunity for improvement there with the copy.
Yeah, that's a great point about the voiceover too, because that fits within that same style and demographic. So, yeah. Do we think it's on brand? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was gonna add to this really quick. Something that's difficult for me is like I think I have a small like I have a small issue with I think the brand in general, Tinder. I'm not a huge fan of like their promotion of specific ways of interacting with other people. I think it's very shallow, and I think it can be very, so like there's the moral side of that for me that I want to like separate myself from and try to just understand what are the issues with this ad. And ultimately the ad to me was like, hey, you weren't allowed to have sex with a bunch of people before, and now you can have sex with whoever you want. Go download our app. And I think that's like that is the on brand part. And it felt to me like somebody was sitting in a boardroom going like, guys, we're getting a lot of crap here for like our terrible app that is ruining millennials and all these whatever. We need to come up with some sort of diversity, something. Somebody go pay a bunch of money to an agency and go make something with some Black people in it. And like maybe that's not the best way to phrase this during this webinar, but that's what it felt like to me. It felt very cheap. It felt incredibly cheap.
Very visceral. Yeah.
It almost angered me a little bit. It almost upset me a little bit. It seemed really cheap.
Well, we go back around, we talk about what Tinder is and the morality with that and the functionality to it, I think is the missed opportunity, right? It is an app. And I think that the way they utilize it, the copy and the storytelling could have lent itself to the functionality of finding the right person. I didn't really, get macking on anybody that you want app other than the gratuitous, glute shots. But I think there's a better opportunity to talk about what the service provides in a way that just didn't seem so forced or just in left field. I think it missed the mark as far as promoting Tinder itself at all.
Well, I feel like that it's like that last scene they could have done without. Like, the last scene where they ride off with their bikes together and they say, we don't know what happened afterwards, but we think it. So, like, come on, really? Like, we know what Tinder is. Everyone knows what Tinder is. You don't, you know, like, I felt
They
like
didn't say swipe.
so
You could have
glad
said swipe once. Just say
I'm
swipe.
so glad I chose this piece to end this segment with. It's great. But we are coming up to the 1 hour mark here. We do have a couple more questions. I don't know if you could stay on for a Q&A session or just to do a final poll. You can. Thank you all for staying and being a part of this event thus far. I do agree that the message or what they're trying to say, where there's like a lot of like structure and formula, just kind of like rules around like relationships and dating before, and now that's kind of open, like them trying to relate it to their brand was a good thing. But yeah, overall, just there's a lot of misses. There's a lot of missteps. So, all right. Do we get the results from that last poll by chance before we move on and see what everyone else thought?
Wow.
Okay, so yeah, 40% of people said they did a decent job. We had 8% of people said they did a great opportunity of representation. 28% of people said they feel neutral about it. 20 people a little bit off. Yeah, so I mean, again, it's good for different opinions, different awareness. Hopefully this conversation is a good thing to have within your teams, your creative teams, around like, what do we think about this? Is this the right direction? Get outside opinions, partner up with people to get their perspective on it, because even internally you may feel like you're hitting the mark, but then once you release that outwardly, it can be a completely different story altogether. So, all right, let's do the last couple of things. So we are going to finish up with a final poll. So we're going to discuss quickly what our favorite creative piece was today. So we had the piece from Xbox. We have the piece from QuickBooks, INTUIT, P&G, TINDER. You can all vote really quick. Let's see. First and foremost, Chris, what was your favorite piece of the day?
Messaging P&G, but I love the QuickBooks spot. I thought that was awesome.
QuickBooks spot. Okay, great. Anyone else? Alicia?
QuickBooks for me as well.
Okay. Amber, where are you at?
I'm copying Chris. Messaging P&G, overall QuickBooks.
Okay. Can't do double votes here. Okay.
That was like low-key sliding two in.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm gonna flip it up here a little bit. I enjoyed the QuickBooks one a lot, but I really
Dave loves the TINDER one.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's my favorite. The Procter & Gamble piece to me was because I know that what the series is. There's a few more of them like that. There's one called The Talk, which is really good. If you guys haven't seen it, I highly recommend. I think somebody in the comments mentioned it as well. I really like for me, like the purpose behind Procter & Gamble's ad, like that drives a lot of the decisions we make here at RedFork. It's all about purpose, and I love the purpose behind that one a lot. So digging it.
Awesome. Well, let's see what the results say. I don't know, Ralphie, if we got all the votes in on that. QuickBooks, that's the winner. That's the winner right there. It's a great ad.
Nobody liked that Tinder ad. Yes. Nobody liked the Tinder one.
They swiped whatever.
There's only one person who voted for it, and that one person is Dave Diaz. No, I think this is a great representation right there. Cool. Let's get into the biggest takeaway of the day. So, like, what is something that we thought from this conversation? What was the biggest takeaway that we had from the moment? Love to get some takeaways also in the comments so we can see what was the biggest learned, biggest opportunity that was, or insight that was gained from today's discussion. Alicia, what was your biggest takeaway from today?
I think the biggest takeaway is, I don't know, definitely, of course, have diversity because you're talking to different consumers, and then just try to make it feel as authentic as possible. That would be my biggest takeaways from that.
Amber, you look like you're going to say something.
Oh yeah, I just think, I think we all know that diversity in advertising matters. I think the question that we need to be asking ourselves is, how do we make it matter more? And what else can we do? And how do we drive those conversations? And how do we make the simplest of a campaign, that the simplest of a campaign have a ramification that is way bigger than the initial intent? And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think one of the biggest takeaways here is, again, it's so easy to focus on, Black, white, Asian, whatever, Hispanic. When I forget who it was who mentioned age. Was it you, Chris, or you, Amber? One of you guys mentioned age in the Xbox ad. And I was like, yeah, man, I didn't even think about that. Like, duh, of course, you know, like my 5-year-old has been playing on Xbox since he was 3. And like, it's something that's really exciting for him. And people don't think of like a 3-year-old playing Xbox, you know, but like that's really cool. So like for me, the takeaway here is diversity is so much more than just one thing. It is a slew of different things and possibly things that we are not really discussing yet, you know? So I think the biggest question is like, what are those things? Like what qualifies as like, you know, the differences between cultures and social, you know, interactions, and just trying to figure out how can we incorporate those things into any type of messaging, whether it be ads or even, you know, something like this on a webinar where we're speaking, you know, to other individuals. So yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I know it's something that Alicia and I speak about a lot. Is just like there's so many different forms of diversity and representation that are really important. So and having people that are considerate of that is really crucial. And I think that's something that, especially for small businesses, are going to have to start incorporating. It's very easy for large corporations to have someone or a team of people be thinking about all these different things. But how are small businesses, how are small teams going to start incorporating that thinking into their products and services, what they're offering on a regular basis? So yeah, very, very important.
I think what Alicia said too is very important. It's authenticity and being real. Now more than ever, brands are being held accountable. So you can't just rely on slick advertising and, you know, half-baked schemes to try to get diversity into your marketing mix. You need to walk the walk, talk the talk. And that's why I think you can see in the spots that did well, there was a level of authenticity and realness that people could relate to. That's so key.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're going to finish up with a Q&A really quick. If there's any questions from our viewers, and Ralphie, I know that you've been kind of monitoring the chat. If you have any questions, now's the time to submit those questions into the chat, and we'll be glad to address them for you all right now.
Yep,
Ralphie,
and thank you, everyone. Yep, thank you everyone for staying over on time. So a question that was submitted was, if you're starting to create an advertising campaign from scratch, what are some key things you should consider to make sure it's diverse and inclusive?
So if you're starting something from scratch, what are some key things you can do to make sure that they're diverse and exclusive?
Inclusive.
Oh, inclusive. Oh, what did I say?
I mean,
exclusive?
I can jump on that if you want.
Go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
I think when you're creating any campaign, right, foundationally, you need to make sure whatever you're creating is relevant. I think Dave talked about that. There's a relevancy to it. And think about the audience you're speaking to, and then think of the audiences and how is that story going to be told to them in a way that's relevant, from terminology to culture. And don't try to include it just to include it. Include it if the story makes sense. And that goes from, you know, copy down to visuals. When it's forced, it's very easy to tell. So kind of reverse engineer it.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And I think you want to have, you know, right from the creative brainstorming initial beginning, you want to have diversity of ideas. So take a look at yourself and who you are and what you represent, and then maybe pull some different perspectives into that planning process, because the more diverse the group is that plans the campaign, you would think, right, at the end of the campaign, the more diverse the campaign will be.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And representation and inclusivity starts from the very beginning within the creative space. And I think it's also really important that it's okay to be targeting a certain group of people. That's what advertising is all built around, right? And so we even saw some spots like where this is going to be for the LGBTQ plus community. So like we are going to target them. Now make sure that within that creative process, you actually have people that are a part of that, who can speak to how that messaging is going to connect. If they're not a part of the process, you're definitely going to run the risk of missing the mark and creating a situation where you're not really effectively communicating with those people, where you're maybe even offending those people. So you want to make sure with whoever you're speaking with that they're actually a part of the process from the very beginning. And if they're not on your team, obviously it's an area of opportunity to kind of look for and explore within hiring processes, but at least get some outside people to kind of join in, share their perspective, and get involved with the creative process from the beginning. Alicia, I don't know if you had something to say. It looked like you were jumping in.
Just agreeing with what you're saying is because I think that's one thing where a lot of companies right now are being held accountable. They have great advertising, but their teams don't match that. And so there are definitely several organizations that are calling out, different brands and industries about that. So anyone can make a commercial or you can get insight from a diverse group, but do you really believe in that? And you show that by your representation within your organization.
Yeah, definitely. Ralphie, do you want me to read through the Q&A or do you want to kind of manage that so I don't skip over anything?
You can go ahead. Nope, you can go ahead, Arthur.
Okay, let me try this out then. Did you already answer stuff from the Q&A or did you go from the chat feature?
I'm going from the Q&A.
Okay, so let's see. We're going to answer this question a lot. We talked about the positives of D&I. This is from Brian Wilder, by the way. But what are some of the potential pitfalls that can come with creating a more diverse, creative environment? So I guess we're looking for, what are the potential pitfalls that come from creating a more diverse, creative environment?
When we're talking about a more diverse creative environment, just to make sure I understand, are we saying we're talking about the production process or the pre-production process, including diversity within that stage? Is that what they're asking, do you think?
Yeah, I think what Brian is asking is like, we're talking a lot about the positivities of D&I, but what are some of the potential downfalls of D&I within your creative environment? I don't know if anyone wants to address that first. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump on a little bit. I know one of the things in my career is, like-minded people tend to think over time in the same venues or in the same vacuum. With the inclusion process, I think you need to be open to pushing your work out to get feedback, right, wrong, or indifferent, and run it through the filter and not be so hand-tied to it that you can't switch directions on how that's going to respond. I mean, we see it more and more with social media, in Twitter specifically, or Reddit. If anybody's into that, you can really find out how your spots are doing and how brutal people can be. So I think in that process, you need to expose yourself not only to different environments, different people, different input, and different research. Push yourself constantly. Yeah. Otherwise, you can start creating in a vacuum, and then that's just a recipe for disaster.
And just to further clarify this, Brian did have a follow-up. In the beginning, diversity meant we need more Black and brown people within the team. Now it's going to turn into many different subgroups. So what is next? What do you feel like the next part of the diversity cycle is, so to speak? And so I think that's really about, like, there is some complexity around developing diversity teams. There are so many different factors to incorporate. And I think, that can create some challenges in regards to how do you manage your hiring process? How do you build out your developmental teams? It's not as simplistic as keeping it the way it was. It is challenging. I don't see that as a downfall. I think that there will be frustrations as you implement that process. That's normal for any change. But I think there's only positives and only wins from there. I think what could be an issue, though, is when we stop innovating, when we stop creating, when we stop looking at that, we stop kind of incorporating that diversity, and we do get very siloed into the group of people that we have there, and then we just get one-track minded.
You're going to realize quickly that people are going to be underserved. No matter how diverse you try to make your messaging, you're going to use the wrong pronoun, and you got to be okay with that. And I think you got to set up the repercussions that you're not going to please everybody, and you're not going to serve every audience.
Yeah.
Something that we've talked about a lot, even within our own organization as well, and some of the others in which we serve, is something that you hear often from people in charge of hiring is, well, I'm not necessarily looking at color or age or any of that. I'm just trying to hire the best people for the job. Like, the best person for the job is the one that's going to get hired, regardless of who they are, right? The problem with that answer is typically the best person for the job you feel matches a lot of your own characteristics. So you tend to hire yourself over and over again, right? And then the opposite side of that is like, well, I'm just going to hire as diverse as I possibly can for the sake of building this team with a lot of diversity, because I've heard diversity, innovation, so on and so forth, right? And I think the opposite side of that creates problems too, because then you have potentially a team that is wildly ineffective and simply hired because they are of a different, skin tone or different religious belief or whatever. So I think as with everything, balance is going to be massively important. And I think that's relevant to this question too, right? So like, what are the pitfalls? There's going to be pitfalls in everything. And one of these things is like only focusing on diversity and nothing else. Finding balance between those two things, I think, is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to, when we're talking about recruiting diverse talent, that's definitely a misconception in the DEI space about hiring people just for their diversity. You're definitely hiring somebody within that industry who is diverse to give that different perspective. And when we're talking about like, oh, we just hired the best person, it's kind of like the Olympics, right? You can't be the fastest if you haven't competed against the other fast people from different countries, right? So now you're just, it's a self-proclamation and it doesn't, you know, it's not legitimate. And so when we're talking about hiring diverse people, we have to start with definitely having a diverse candidate pool to pick from. And like I mentioned before about recruiting from different organizations and professional organizations, different universities that provide you with diverse talent. But the message is definitely not hiring just because somebody is Black or just because somebody has a disability. It's hiring that person who is qualified for the job, but who also is a person of color to add diversity to that team, or is a part of the LGBTQ+ community to give you that perspective. Because like we all mentioned, when you don't have that, there's a lack of authenticity when it comes to product development, commercials, you name it. People become tone deaf when the team looks the same.
Yeah, definitely agree. All right, last question comes from Gio Kumpa, and it is, when it comes to languages, would it be wrong to include some different ones within an ad, maybe with some subtitles, to decrease the Americanization of some cultures? Like to keep the authenticity of these different cultures being representative. What are the thoughts around incorporating different languages?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, because even that speaks to having a diverse team, right? So do you have a team that can do translations? I know that's one of the teams that I work with on a day-to-day basis. Like if we have different patients and things like that that speak another language. So it's definitely, it just goes back to having a diverse team. When you have diverse representation, you can speak to these things and you can speak to that consumer authentically. So I think that would be a great thing, so it doesn't get lost in translation, like you're saying.
And I think it's a balance between not only just language, but it's culture, right? Mm-hmm. And that runs a fine line of cultural appropriation, and that goes down a whole slippery slope, right? Mm-hmm. I think to have it, and it makes sense, again, going back to my original, when you're designing and when you're coming up with a concept, if that speaks authentically to what you would have to go through, whatever that challenge is, and it makes sense. If you're doing it just to add it in, that's when, going back to what Alicia says, it becomes inauthentic and it seems forced, and then it just kind of flatlines.
Yeah, I think you're ultimately talking about relevancy, right? Like, are we talking about a spot for Airbnb where they're all over the world? Or are we talking about a spot for like a little local American restaurant in Orlando that there's no reason to do any other languages, So it's all about relevancy, I think, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a good idea for Airbnb, by the way. No.
Yeah, right.
Well, with that, we'll finish this out. Thank you all so much for being here. Terry, I'll let you close out the event really quick.
Thanks, Arthur, and thank you, all you panelists, for doing such a great job today and giving us your time and your attention and your feedback and insight on these ads. I'm sure it's really valuable. I got a lot of insight from it. It got me thinking. Arthur, thank you for selecting those spots and putting this together. And all you attendees that are still hanging in there, thank you very much. We really appreciate you being part of this today and interacting with us like you did. So again, thank you so much. Be on the lookout for more great presentations from AAF Orlando. Join the Slack team, become a mentor, join a committee, prepare for the Addy Awards, do all of it now, today, before 4:30. No, keep all that in mind, please, folks. And we really look forward to everybody participating with AAF Orlando as we move forward this year. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.